I'm always sorry for causing you trouble. Thank you so much for being together as a couple until now." The note that was placed on the table, that was the beginning of everything. I am Robert Turner, 30 years old. I work at a publishing company's editorial department. 3 years ago, I married my coworker, Amy, and we became one of those trendy dual income, no kids, aka dinks couples. We had a fulfilling life, both in work and in our personal lives, and our relationship as a couple was great, so there was nothing to complain about. But one day, out of the blue, Amy left home, leaving behind a note. We hadn't had any particularly big fights, and I couldn't recall ever blaming her. I was left completely bewildered, not understanding the reason for the divorce. If I look back at it now, our first encounter was during the new employee training at work. I was in my 5th year at the company and was responsible for mentoring Amy, who had just graduated from college and was part of the younger generation.
I'm Amy Turner. Nice to meet you.
I felt a little uneasy about how excessively cheerful and carefree she was. As expected, she didn't take work seriously at all. She was clumsy and made a lot of mistakes, so it was kind of typical rookie. You couldn't do anything right. But I decided to give it my all to make her a capable editor, no matter what it took. I had to figure out her strengths somehow. I began to carefully observe Amy's characteristics. She was clearly the type you didn't listen to the end of questions during quizzes and made mistakes. But she put in her best effort in everything she did. And just having Amy in the office brightened up the atmosphere. She always greeted everyone with a smile, and before I knew it, she became the office's idol. Ironically, even though I was her senior, I ended up learning from Amy. Being good at work is not the only thing a professional needs. It's also important for people to think that you're someone they can rely on, even when they need help. Amy gradually transformed into a competent worker, using her charm and communication skills as her weapons. I realized that I was attracted to Amy. While working together with her and providing diligent guidance, I didn't want to mix work and personal matters. So for a whole year, I served as Amy's mentor and taught her the basics of being an editor. And one day, after I had stepped down as Amy's mentor, I invited her to dinner, under the pretense of a celebration for completing the new employee training.
Robert, are you sure? This place is famous and even featured in magazines, right?
Amy looked around nervously. The restaurant was clearly too extravagant for just a regular celebration. I cheerfully reassured her, "Today, it's on me. It's a reward for all your hard work over the past year, so I went all out." I said that. Amy visibly relaxed and smiled in relief. She was concerned about her dining companion and their financial situation. That's why I liked her. We talked about work while savoring the renowned French full-course meal. Drinking a bit of wine, Amy's cheeks turned slightly pink, and she looked so cute that I couldn't help but be charmed. After dessert was served, to be honest, the reason for this celebration is actually an excuse to invite you, I said to Amy, who was bringing sweets to her mouth with a smile. And I continued, "I actually want to seriously date you, not as a colleague." Amy's mouth hung open wide, looking surprised. I thought maybe it was a bad idea after all. Just as I was starting to feel discouraged, Amy burst into laughter.
Of course, it's okay. Yay. My wish came true for a year.
Amy's response nearly floored me. She was such an honest girl. I found myself laughing along with her and feeling relieved. For some reason, her boundless cheerfulness was a source of comfort to me. I was glad she was my partner. Even after we started dating, I often felt that way. My personality is the serious and meticulous one, and her personality is the cheerful and impulsive one. You and I make the perfect couple when we add our qualities together. So, would you please marry me? That's how I proposed to her. Amy cried tears of joy, and we managed to get married happily. Even after our marriage, Amy felt like the car had gone out of control. She followed her desires so faithfully that she made decisions without consulting me and immediately put them into action. She would suddenly decide on our travel destination or bring home a pet without any prior discussion. I would smile wryly, but gradually develop the skill to stop Amy. I could understand what she was thinking most of the time and anticipate and prevent her from doing things that might get her into trouble. In a way, I became the stopper in our relationship. Amy said,
I'm not a child anymore, so can you stop checking on my every move? Seriously, Robert, it feels like you're my guardian.
She argued with me like a comedy duo. Every time I interacted with her, I would savor the happiness of being with Amy. However, I wondered what on earth the note on this table was about. Now, I couldn't understand Amy's feelings at all. Moreover, she had even sent a resignation letter to her workplace. Anger welled up inside me without thinking. I quickly grabbed my cell phone. I called multiple times, but there was no answer. I panicked and tried to contact Amy's family, but it seemed she hadn't returned home. Amy's mother apologized to me with a sense of regret.
I'm really sorry. But since we haven't heard from her either, we don't know what to do.
She was right. Once Amy had made up her mind, blaming someone wouldn't change the outcome. In the end, I couldn't even have a discussion with Amy after that. 3 months later, I reluctantly submitted the divorce documents. It was a bitter decision that I made after being persuaded by both my parents and Amy's parents. 5 years after the divorce with Amy, I had become a lonely single man and threw myself even more into my editorial work than before. Well, I had no choice but to use work to distract myself from loneliness. I was going to Denver, Colorado, where Amy's family lived, to work on a travel guide for each state. I had a busy day ahead of me. I had been so busy that I didn't realize it was nearly evening when I finished interviews and meetings all day. I said goodbye to the team members and started walking in the downtown area. Come to think of it, I hadn't been to Colorado once since my divorce with Amy. I don't know why, but I suddenly felt nostalgic and decided to take a leisurely stroll around the streets in Denver. That's when it happened. I spotted a mother holding the hand of a young child coming towards me. As I absent-mindedly gazed at them, I inadvertently muttered in shock, "Amy, isn't that Amy?" I couldn't help it and tried to blend into the crowd to sneak a peek at her from afar. It was indeed Amy. And thanks to the child throwing a tantrum, it seemed that Amy hadn't noticed me at all. She walked past me, talking to the child. Watching her like that, my pride was completely shattered. Dark emotions surged within me. Is Amy the only one who remarried and is happily living her life after our divorce? Even though it's been 5 years, I was honestly surprised by the immense damage I was feeling. I have given up on Amy. Somewhere deep inside, I realized that my feelings for Amy had never truly faded. But Amy has moved on, leaving me behind. I had to repeatedly remind myself of that. Unfortunately, though, it means I had no role to play. Finally, I decided to leave that place, feeling like I could accept it. However, at that moment,
Mommy, there's Daddy.
I heard the cute voice of a child and instinctively turned around. Then, there, just a few steps away, stood Amy, looking surprised. The two of us were frozen in place. I couldn't get the words "Daddy" out of my head. Amy remained silent, looking uncomfortable. Long time no see. You seem well. If you have the time. I couldn't help but suggest to go to a nearby coffee shop to talk. Amy nodded slightly, and I addressed the child. His name was Kevin. He looked like a lively and healthy boy. We entered a nearby coffee shop and, despite the initial awkwardness, began to chat about our recent lives and engage in trivial conversation. After a while, I mustered the courage to ask Amy the question that had been on my mind. Actually, why did we end up getting divorced? I can't think of any reason at all. Amy looked uneasy, but it seemed like she had made up her mind. She took a deep breath and said,
There's something I haven't told you for a long time.
I listened intently, my heart pounding. What was the reason that drove Amy to leave our home? What had I done?
I found out your true feelings. I overheard you saying that having a wife was a hindrance, that we got married too early.
As Amy looked after Kevin, she spoke to me earnestly. Her voice gradually quivered, and tears welled up in her eyes. Amy said that upon hearing this, she felt she shouldn't be here and was leaving. While I was listening attentively to Amy's story, for a moment, I was left dumbfounded. I had no recollection of making such a statement. Did I really say something like that? When I asked her if it might be a case of mistaken identity, she only shook her head. As I stood there, arms crossed, lost in thought, it suddenly hit me. Could it be? I got it. It was that time. I exclaimed loudly enough for the entire coffee shop to hear. No, it's your misunderstanding. I began to explain the situation at the time to the bewildered Amy. It was about my work in editing. It was a made-up story, fiction. I'm sure you misunderstood it. You know my university junior, Ethan, is a writer, right? Amy finally seemed to understand and covered her open mouth with her hand. I proceeded to explain Ethan's situation. He was working and pursuing a career as a novelist at the same time. He had one's fingers in two pies, so when Ethan came to me often, he always sought writing advice. On that day 5 years ago, Ethan had hit a roadblock while working on a submission for a literary award and called me for advice.
Please, don't tell Amy that I contacted you. I think she has some professional connection with the judges, doesn't she? So tell me honestly, what do you think of my work?
Without thinking, I gave him some advice. I think the protagonist's emotional state regarding considering divorce isn't well written. If it were me, I'd emphasize how his wife's presence is a hindrance and that the marriage was rushed. Otherwise, the subsequent writing won't have the right impact. Ethan didn't want the details of his work to be heard by others, so I intentionally moved to the bedroom to discuss it and offer my advice. Little did I know that Amy had come into the bedroom to retrieve something at that moment. Amy had misunderstood my advice and thought I was talking about our own marriage. 5 years later, I discovered this shocking truth. I can't help but be amused and baffled by Amy's clumsiness. Amy, with a somewhat awkward smile, seems to share the sentiment. We've gone through a divorce all because of her misunderstanding. I guess all I can do now is laugh about it.
I'm really sorry. It was all my misunderstanding.
I can't bring myself to say that it's okay. Her actions were far from okay. Why didn't she just ask me about it before leaving the house? It's just another one of Amy's typical misunderstandings. Amy starts to explain in a hesitant manner.
After the divorce from you, I actually wanted to go back to my parents' home. But then, I found out I was 2 months pregnant. I couldn't go back to your place or my parents' place.
So, she explained her situation to an acquaintance in the editing production and got a job as a contract employee. Amy didn't want to burden her parents, so she rented an apartment and managed to give birth to our child on her own. However, being a single mother turned out to be more challenging than she thought. She struggled financially, and finally, she came back to her parents' home. She hadn't been in touch with them for a long time, and she says they gave her quite a scolding. While listening to her, I can't help but feel like I'm about to fall out of my chair, and I glance at Kevin, who's eating his parfait in front of me. Is this child really mine? I couldn't help but ask the one question that had been bothering me the most. Earlier, Kevin called me Daddy, didn't he? How did he know that without even meeting me? Amy explains with a somewhat awkward smile.
At Kevin's preschool, they were making drawings for Father's Day. When he asked, "Where's my daddy?" I showed him a picture of you. That's why he hugged you right away when he saw you today.
I was inundated with various shocking revelations, and my mind was in turmoil. Not only had the cause of our divorce been Amy's misunderstanding, but I had also unintentionally become a father to a boy.
I'm really, really sorry. My misconceptions and hasty judgments disrupted your life and caused you trouble.
Amy began to apologize fervently. While I was internally frustrated, I couldn't help but find the situation increasingly amusing. Isn't this a fantastic life? I've wanted children from the beginning of our marriage, and I never really wanted to divorce Amy in the first place. In fact, it's a happy situation for me. While thinking that, I've become oddly accepting of Amy's eccentricity. Even though I was that serious and stubborn, I'm not even fazed by the fact that there's a hidden child. It's okay, really, calm down. More importantly, thank you so much for raising our child alone for these past 5 years. It must have been tough, and you did really well. I stopped Amy from apologizing wholeheartedly and continued, looking at her with teary eyes. I apologize for creating a situation where you might have misunderstood that I should have been your greatest supporter, wanted a divorce. Besides, back then, I was so busy with work and constantly on business trips. So it wouldn't have been strange for you to suspect me of infidelity. Maybe she recalled that time. Amy suddenly burst into tears. That's right, I was at fault too. I shouldn't jump to conclusions based on her quick judgments. I gently suggest to Amy, shall we fix this messed up situation together? You, me, and Kevin, should we give it another try? When I said that, Amy, sobbing, replied,
Is it really okay with someone as clumsy as me? What if I cause trouble for you again, Robert?
She said that, but I laughed and said, What are you talking about now? You've been like this from the beginning. My otherwise dull life becomes enjoyable and fulfilling because of the interesting accent called you. Come on, let's go down to the bureau for the marriage license. Amy finally smiled when she heard my sarcastic remark. Kevin was seeing us all with smiling faces and shouted,
Mom, Dad, let's go.
That's my boy. He understands how to handle Amy's mood. The three of us walk hand in hand on the road as the sun sets, so that we didn't pass by each other anymore, and we didn't drift apart anymore. It was finally the moment when Amy and I became a genuine married couple. A year has passed since our fateful reunion in Denver. We successfully remarried. We returned to being the same old eccentric couple, and Kevin quickly accepted me too. Today is Kevin's preschool field day. I'm putting my all into the parent-child event. I'm going to win first place in the parent-child competition for my son, who has been lonely for 5 years. Amy watches me with a happy expression. Maybe I've treated Amy like a daughter until now. But now, we're partners in each other's important lives. I make sure to listen to Amy's opinions well before making decisions on my own. These past 5 years have had their share of challenges, but we'll make every day a happy one, enough to turn it into material for stories. I'm really determined,